Man.
All right. That was in my office.
Oh, okay. All right. I see.
It wasn't just like,
Yeah.
surprise. We talked earlier.
Oh, yeah. I know. Look at that. Ryan's even a smidge.
Yeah, I am a little short, aren't I? All right, who messed with my chair? Oh, that's so much better.
You're so tall now, Steve.
I moved your gavel over for you, and then I decided to fix your chair too.
You did it. Okay, thanks, Lee. You know I can always count on you. Thanks. All right, so.
I thought it was pretty funny when he did that.
Still have 6:59.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
Right?
Yeah, it's not time.
We're early.
Yeah, right. Tons of time.
No. Actually, no one on the agenda tonight, so it'll be pretty quick because new business item number one's going to be struck.
Oh, yeah.
So, new business item number one.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Yeah, we're not going to consider this tonight.
The state legislative agenda. Okay. I looked at that.
Well, we got two big ones. We got the procedure, and then we got
The legislative agenda, I saw the Medicaid.
That's again. That's a county thing.
And I
That's
did
okay,
do,
we can repeat it.
I don't know.
Well, that's your thing. You don't get a vote.
I know. All right, it's 7 p.m. in Gardner, Kansas. We're going to call Gardner City Council meeting to order. Please rise with me, and if you can, and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we have a light agenda this evening. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be removing one of the new business items. New business item number one will not be considered this evening because we have some legal changes to make to the ordinance, and our esteemed city attorney Ryan Denk is at the forefront of that. And so
wow.
I want to make sure that he gets his due.
You were shocked about it too.
All right, so we're going to start today with a pleasant presentation from our city clerk, Amy Nasta, one that's been twice delayed, and so we're all waiting on this with bated breath.
Let me pull up the right presentation. Used to being able to do that from over here.
Camera's back.
Yes, with
Yeah,
both
which
cameras.
camera are we watching now?
We're in stereo.
Both. That could cause a time warp.
Super HD.
All
It's
right.
3D now.
Okay. Yes, Amy.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. During the initial review of governing body rules of procedure, the governing body requested additional information on 6 items. A 7th item has been identified by staff and will be presented for your consideration as well. Please note that tonight's presentation is not intended to develop the exact final language of the document. Rather, key points will be presented, and the governing body will be asked to make decisions on if they would like to see the requested additional information added, changed, or omitted. Using this direction, staff will work with legal counsel as warranted to create exact language that captures the direction provided by the governing body. Please additionally note that there is no action scheduled to be taken on this item tonight outside of the provision of direction during this presentation. As indicated moments ago, your direction will help staff to create a finalized version of the governing body rules of procedure, which will be voted on along with all necessary accompanying documents in an upcoming council meeting. More information on this will be provided at the conclusion of this presentation. So I thought that the best thing to do, since we don't usually do public comments with presentations, would be to go through each item individually and let you give your feedback on each one, if that is okay with you, Mayor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So we'll start with Chapter 3. This would be a new section. During the previous presentation, the governing body was asked if they would like to add the language "including on social media" to the end of several stipulations regarding etiquette that are currently included in Chapter 3. While the governing body did not express an interest in adding this language, it was requested that staff return with language regarding social media usage for possible inclusion in a separate section. Staff has modified and greatly reduced the current social media policy utilized by the city, which includes provisions for staff, appointed officials, and elected officials. Staff recommends the following general provisions for social media usage be included in governing body rules of procedure. When using social media, as with any other electronic communication, elected officials should be mindful of the risk associated with violating both the letter and the spirit of the Kansas Open Meetings Act, or KOMA, and recognize the potential for personal posts to be considered as the official position of the city. Elected officials should not post official information about the city without first consulting with the PIO, as potential errors could have unforeseen consequences or may create unforeseen liability issues. This is in line with the governing body's previous direction that the PIO should be involved in contact with the general media and the public in order to ensure the city is speaking with one voice and is delivering a consistent message. Finally, elected officials shall not use their official city social media sites for campaigning purposes. So with that in mind, would the governing body prefer to add this new section or to leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently with no social media usage provisions?
Quick question, if you don't mind.
Nope.
The elected officials shall not use official city social media sites. What are we considering official?
Anything that's administered by the city.
By the city, that's what I
Yes.
just want to make sure that's
Correct.
clear. Okay.
So anything that's under the purview of the PIO.
Right,
And
we don't have the
is-
ability to post on that anyways.
And the words official information should be defined as well.
Okay, we can further,
Right, because
Define that.
if I
Yeah.
chime in on something specific.
Like if someone asks me, okay, well, what's the update with the Justice Center, for example? And I've had that before, okay? I cannot speak for the city on the Justice Center because I'm not close enough to that to be able to give an informed response. So then I go to the chief and I go to the PIO and say, well, what can I say about the Justice Center, if anything? And they'll come back to me with a statement, and that statement is what I can move forward with. That's what it means.
well, and the communications manager, Marshall Kendo, and I were discussing this morning, and we may be able to, if you would like, add language that it's more the initial statements
Mhm.
that you would make rather than if you're responding to
Or
a
chiming in
citizen.
about something
You know, we
specific.
would still like you to confer if there's questions, but instead of releasing an initial statement without consultation.
That includes like development information and stuff like that.
I try not to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things are typically, anyway, they should be
Right.
deferred to the city
Mhm.
for official comment anyway.
I agree. But then again, we all have First Amendment rights, and we can speak on topics. It's just that we've got to be kind of careful, understanding we're mindful that, you know, we, even in our personal capacities, are seen as representatives of the city. And it's a problem, but it is what it is.
Should we change that to should not to maybe should be mindful of, or, I mean, these seem like generalized guidelines, they're not
Yeah.
specific laws
So elected officials should be mindful not to post official information.
of posting official information.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because I could see, you know, there is the potential for somebody to
Mhm.
abuse that policy.
I agree.
So, I mean, multiple people abuse against a certain individual, right? So,
So I'm hearing you would like to change that to should be mindful of.
Posting official
Yes.
information. Yeah.
Ryan, does COMA have an opinion on social media and that kind of goes along in the spirit of what we see on the screen?
You know, the only thing that it does say is that, you know, you can have a violation of COMA short of being in an official setting like this. So if you are communicating in a manner, whether it be on Facebook or by email, and you're communicating with the majority of the quorum,
Mhm.
and there's interactive communication in that forum, then that can constitute a violation of COMA.
And likes on a Facebook post are considered a response, are they not?
that's the way I've always seen it.
Yep.
That's why
So-
I'm hesitant to.
That's very important that people understand that.
That would make sense. I mean, that's interactive, that's
Exactly.
feedback, so.
Mhm. Yep.
Thank you.
Anything from Dave?
It seems like the gist of what everybody just said is that we have to be mindful and be very diligent in what you do and don't say. So
Mhm.
I'm hesitant if we even want to put in this section, knowing that the position might just be always refer back to the PIO.
Well, again, these are rules of procedure, they're not statute, they're not statute.
I understand that. I mean, we don't have any meat to
But-
the rules and procedures anyway, right? As
Well-
far as if you break a rule.
Well, we're working on
I
that.
mean,
but
coma,
let's-
yes, but the rest, no.
All right, so.
So these are general guidelines.
Uh-huh,
It seems like the general guideline is refer to the PIO.
Yeah.
It's about that simple.
we should, we'll refer back to the PIO and everything then.
Uh-huh.
I mean, not just social media.
Mhm.
Any written correspondence, public comments?
Yep. So it's not really limited to social media, so I'm not sure there's a need for a social media section.
If I may, there was a section you all had asked to have added to refer to the PIO for contact with the media and outside entities. You had just asked for information specific to social media usage, and we felt that it would be pertinent to add conferring with the PIO to that section as well.
And and social media is the one portion of correspondence with the public that is not really covered under state statute at all.
No,
There's
and it is
really
not
a lot of,
currently mentioned in your governing body rules of procedure at all either.
so we could add that to public correspondence and just add, and social media,
Mhm.
which would, and that's what I think was rejected by the governing body
Yes, sir.
last time.
Last time it was rejected.
Gosh, we're flip-floppers.
Yeah. 'Cause that's-
I feel bad for you, Amy.
It's a
so
governing body
wishy-washy.
decision.
I think we need to
just-
refer to social media somewhere in the policy because it's not being addressed anywhere.
Yeah, I think it just doesn't need to be,
Its own section.
we have to be clear and, on what we're actually trying to get accomplished
Mhm.
with this. Because we're not trying to stop future council members from using social media.
Correct.
Um, That's not what the point of this is, basically just to not be forthcoming with information that should be shared by the PIO
Mhm.
or as an official, not to represent the
official
city in an
capacity.
official capacity, sort of like the training videos we've
Right.
seen.
Yep.
I think it's important that we have something in there, though.
Well, I think that,
they're general guidelines.
so you would like to see a new section on social media?
No, I just agree with what I'm looking at here, and I agree with what Lee said.
So somewhere in there, just so it
Because I
matches.
think we have to set a precedent.
All right, so what
If
we're
I
saying
may,
is, yeah.
Chapter 3, Chapter 3 is divided into various sections of very small sections on social media, contact with the public, contact with city administrator and staff. It's divided into multiple, this wouldn't be like a gigantic section, it would be very similar to the other sections of Chapter 3, should you choose to include it.
Some precedent.
It would just be a lettered section of Chapter 3, similar to all the other ones.
Yeah, I like the first bullet. I think it's good for the reference to coma.
Yep.
Second bullet, if we're gonna leave that in there, it definitely needs to actually define or reference a definition of what is considered official information.
Yeah. Personal opinion would not be counted under official information.
Right.
That's basically what we're talking about.
Yes.
Right, but you just,
Well-
if you like the first bullet, you just recognize the potential for a personal post to be considered the official position of the city.
That is correct.
So unless you're going to tag every single thing you write as city councilman, as Joe Blow,
Well, what you can say, you can have a disclaimer on those set positions saying, this is my own personal opinion, does not reflect the position, the official position of the city of Gardner.
I mean, you
Or
can
you
put a
might be busy
disclaimer on
typing that
everything.
out.
Yeah.
But I think that's to protect us and the city, guys.
I think everybody knows that with me, don't they?
Yeah.
I'm not commenting.
Right.
So maybe we need something a little more legalistic in that second clause in that first bullet.
All right.
you know, if I could jump in, I mean, if you look at the current section 3,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, social media is, it has some different aspects to it, but chapter 3 breaks it out into different types of audiences: general conduct, conduct with members, conduct with city administrator and staff. I mean, I think you've in essence captured all of the appropriate communications or nature of communications in there, and, you know, holding yourself out as representing yourself as a representative of the city, or holding yourself out as presenting official policy of the city. So, I mean, I just wanted to draw your attention to that you already have defined a lot of this. Social media is just another manner of communicating that, and maybe if we kind of focus on what's unique about social media rather than the content of the speech.
Mhm. Oh, yes.
Just a suggestion.
So the other thing is too, like if I have to start putting at the end of everything I say, this is not, what did you say, you know?
The official position of the city
Right,
coroner.
do I put that on everything, like my Ugly Agent podcast videos, and I mean, where do I stop putting it on? Because there, I mean, I run all kinds of different social media, and
Well, to your point, Rich, what's the line in the sand? If it's
Delineators, yeah.
Randy Gregorczyk, city councilman on the Facebook page, or
Right.
just Randy Gregorczyk, husband and father?
because I mean, I run 6 different pages and a couple of YouTube channels, and, you know,
Yep.
so where do I stop?
So
Well,
where's
there-
the deciding factor at, Ryan?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
So if Rich, to his point, is speaking on Rich podcast or Rich personal Facebook page, is he always gonna have to put some sort of disclaimer, or is it just through the media or the site, the Facebook page of Councilman Melton?
Understand that Councilman Melton's page is not a city-owned page.
Right.
I don't disagree,
neither
is mine or Lee's or
Yeah, or mine.
Mine has that disclaimer on it.
Well, that's
Good
good.
idea.
Well, we could pin a post at the top of all of them on
Yeah.
a personal page and say, this is not the opinion
And
of.
well, here's the thing, and pardon me, but there are a lot of people who already accuse me of using my position for, you know, to gain favor somehow. And I don't want to associate those people around the country who don't know I do this job. I mean, there's no reason to tell them, you know, because they don't care. They just like the product that I sell. So to introduce them to that is to not,
Yeah. Like Dr.
It
Todd
interferes-
Winter's orthopedist
right.
doesn't want to necessarily advertise that he's a member of the Gardner
Orthopedist?
City Council.
Chiropractor.
Chiropractor, orthopedist, chiropractor.
Chiropractor.
There's bones in there somewhere.
It's somewhere in there. Back, legs, it doesn't
Anyway, back
really
to the
matter.
point.
Right.
But yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So,
Anyway, I'm sorry. But yeah, I
Close
mean,
enough.
you wouldn't want to have that, and yeah, I'm just as embarrassed as you are, Dr. Todd.
I don't think so.
Let's see what Ryan says on that line in the sand.
Yes.
So, the policies that I've had with other municipalities is, as long as, if you're on your personal Facebook page, as long as you're not holding yourself out as saying, you know, I'm speaking as a city councilman,
Right.
and then you follow it up. I mean, if you don't preference that as you speaking in your official capacity, then I think you're fine. I mean, that's basically what the social media policies that I've written for other municipalities have been.
I think that's appropriate.
That sounds fair.
And, you know, to be candid with you, with all of you up here except for Steve, because Steve is the chief executive officer of the city, he kind of has a unique position in that he kind of can speak for the city.
Can make things happen.
Whereas the rest of you are one vote,
Yeah.
and it takes a majority vote of the quorum to officially bind the city. So
So
if,
you gotta be
as long as you're not out there saying, well, you know, and there would be other issues with this, right? Hey, I know that a majority of the governing body wouldn't support this. We'd
Right.
have coma issues with that as well,
Yeah.
but then you would also be purporting to speak for this entity,
Right.
which is the governing body of the city.
Mhm. I really on my P's and Q's.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Good luck.
So even if we add this, I'm shelving this for 1 second,
Mhm.
because with chapter 3, section
Do you like H
C,
or
and then
something?
D, conduct with the public, it already says explicitly state when their opinions and positions do not represent the city council when representing their individual opinions and positions.
Mhm.
Sounds like we don't need to explicitly state that unless we are representing the city, not when we aren't.
So the policies I've written for other agencies have state, you know, when you're making postings, personal postings, don't hold yourself out in your official capacity.
So that means if you're speaking on your city council page, even if it's personally run, if you are holding yourself out there in that capacity, expect to get dinged if you make a misstep.
So that's why it's important on those pages to just talk about what's happened in the public. Right. What's already happened.
Exactly. Don't bring in
Which is-
any new information.
Yep.
Yes, city administrator. Interim.
No, that wasn't to look at you, it was just how city clerk's looking for consensus direction here. So
All right.
first question is.
Yeah,
do
it was
you-
easier not to answer that
Right,
question.
I know.
Oh, no.
I mean,
Does it
Want
make
something
sense to
in
have
here or not?
does it make sense to add a new section with just this information? Or do you want to add social media references to conduct with the public?
it may be better just to have the social media added into that one section, and so it's not a new section all its own.
Okay.
Because then it's all together in one place.
I mean,
I'm amenable to that, I think.
on that one bullet point, yeah, we could expand it to say, such
By the
as
way, and-
social
right.
media, email. so-
Right, and then you could clarify it too and say, hey, if it's on, you know, you need to just be clear about when you're saying something as a council member and when you're saying it as a citizen.
Mhm.
So I'm hearing consensus to add where pertinent, including on social media,
Correct.
for
to
me.
the current provisions of Chapter 3.
So basically, disregard what we did last meeting.
Disregard
Right.
your previous direction.
Aren't you glad we waited a couple weeks?
But when you bring that back,
That's
Guess
okay.
what? Have both ready next time, because we may change our mind again.
All right, next.
Okay, Chapter 3A, Paragraph 2, Bullet 4. States all members present for meetings have the right to vote on matters unless prevented by a conflict of interest. The governing body has expressed a desire to add basic clarification regarding what constitutes a conflict of interest, including language on recusal. After extensive review of conflict of interest policies from Kansas statutes, specifically KSA 754301A, and several municipalities, staff recommends the following basic provisions. Please note these provisions would be further fleshed out for clarification and are subject to final approval by legal counsel. Please further note this would be based on the honor system and is meant to provide governing body members with general guidelines only, as financial disclosures are not required. Conflict of interest shall be defined as having substantial interest in a topic being considered by the governing body. Substantial interest shall include the following: a governing body member and/or his/her spouse, individually or collectively, owns a legal or equitable interest exceeding $5,000 or 5% of any business, whichever is less. A governing body member and/or his/her spouse, individually or collectively, has received taxable compensation of $2,000 or more from a business. A governing body member and/or his/her spouse holds a position of officer, director, associate, partner, or proprietor of any business other than organizations exempt from federal taxation of corporations under Section 501c3, Chapter 26 of the United States Code, regardless of the amount of compensation received from such a position. Governing body members are encouraged to recuse themselves from participating in discussion about or voting on matters relating to items for which they have a conflict of interest. Would the governing body prefer to add this clarification regarding what constitutes a conflict of interest, or leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently with no clarification regarding conflicts of interest?
I like it.
I like the clarification, but if that text came straight out of that KSA, I would just list it. That way, if it changes, We don't have to update this.
Per the KSA
Yep.
guidelines.
There are some guidelines you may not wish to follow in there as well.
Okay.
They get extremely specific,
Okay.
but I can bring those back if you wish, or I was trying to keep it very
Yeah,
general.
I think this is
If-
good.
If this is
Yeah.
the simpler version of that, that's fine.
Yeah, it's about 2 big, huge pages long, and it gets
Okay.
very in the weeds.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. I'd rather
It's
see all the
unlikely
weeds.
that most of us will have a problem with this anyway.
No, this is good. I like this.
I do have one question for Ryan on bullet number 2, and I think I know the answer, but it says, receive taxable compensation of $2,000. So if a member of the governing body during a campaign receives $2,000 from a contribution perspective, that's not taxable, correct? Okay.
No, I think this has nothing to do with campaign contributions. It has everything to do with actually have a substantial interest in a,
Well, that's why I was
Specific.
clarifying taxable compensation.
yeah,
Well, compensation is different than a contribution.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just clarifying. I
Yep.
agree.
yep. Okay,
So is that consensus to add this clarification
Yes.
Yes.
on
Yes.
conflict of interest?
Yep. Good work.
Thank you.
So the next one concerns Chapter 3A, Paragraph 2, Bullet 5. The governing body has expressed a desire to clarify basic attendance expectations based on the current attendance expectations for boards and commissions. These expectations are defined as follows. Missing 3 consecutive meetings without an excuse. Excuse shall mean more than inconvenience and includes illness or family emergency. And failing to attend a minimum of 2/3 of regular and special meetings in a 12-month period. Would the governing body prefer to add this clarification regarding attendance expectations or leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently with no clarification regarding attendance expectations?
I like it.
Now, does this, so if you call in, is that considered attendance at a meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I think the only thing I could see is would excuse also include, like, for example, you're in a different part of the world.
Listen to
At
you.
the time of
Make
the,
it personal.
no, hey, no, I think I got someone to my immediate right that also has had that same situation.
He calls in though.
Not when he's in, like, the Far East, that's like, you know.
Well, there is
middle of the
another
night.
part to this, so I'll
Yes.
just go ahead and let you consider both parts at once.
Okay.
So the current attendance expectations for boards and commissions state business commitments shall not be a good excuse. But would the governing body like to include this as well, or would you prefer to leave them as they're stated on the slide above?
I think we're all part-time here, so I would like to remove that. Not that it's a problem for me, because I've been able to meet these requirements pretty easily.
I don't see a problem in keeping them in because we were elected to these positions.
True.
I mean, we have a fiduciary duty to our citizens to keep, I just wanted to make sure that, you know, we have the understanding that if we miss a meeting based on a work commitment, it's,
And
Not
it is a
gonna be
minimum of
considered excused.
2/3 of regular meetings in a 12-month period, regular and special meetings. But in general, that would be attending 16 of 24 meetings. So that would be 8 meetings that you could miss and not call in potentially.
and understanding this is not, again, legally binding, it would be considered
Right.
subject to reprimand,
Yeah.
but that's about it.
But that second bullet, anytime we have something like that, what's the 12-month period? January through December? How many special meetings are we gonna call? How many regular meetings might get canceled? Is it 2/3 because you know, somebody is removed and you fill in a vacancy and you're only here for so long? Is it a rolling 12 months? What is, you don't know what that is. So
Is
even if
12
you were
months
trying to
start?
do something with business, you can't
Yeah.
schedule that. So I would definitely take out that bullet point.
And the 12-month, so either a rolling 12-month period or a 12 calendar month period.
No, I would take out the whole bullet point, because
Yeah.
the whole point of all of these governing body rules and procedures is to provide guidelines, right? We've already established there's no teeth to them, there's no reprimand, right? So
Not yet.
there are guidelines as to how we should
Right.
act. So the
Yep.
first one tells you what it should be. You should be here,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty simple.
So in the second bullet, to your point, this, I mean, what we're trying to do is make sure that everybody's here for at least 2/3 of all of the scheduled meetings. And at what point do you call that 12-month period? I mean,
When does it start?
Just
When
say
is
a
this-
consecutive 12-month period.
That's, 12-month rolling.
Yeah, it would
Rolling 12
typically
months.
be
Maybe
considered a
consecutive
rolling. It would
12
be calendar year. If it was January to December
Yeah.
would be typically how it would be written in a document such as this. So this would typically be interpreted as a rolling 12-month period.
starting January to January?
No, rolling means,
Rolling means whatever.
and the 12 months previous
From
to
the-
that date.
Okay.
And you could take out special meetings and just say regular meetings. I mean,
Yeah, because
Just
special
make-
meetings are a little bit dicey.
yeah.
I mean, we still have to have a quorum, but
But it's harder if
it's
the work
harder
schedule.
to get us, to get us an impromptu special meeting scheduled. Typically, if we don't have 3 council member, or 4 council members, we don't schedule a special meeting anyway. But, yeah, I think we probably need to remove the "and special" from that.
So remove the and special meetings. And would you
regular.
like to include the point about business commitments, or would you like to leave that off as it currently is on this slide?
I think we all have business commitments. We try to work around them for regular meetings. That's why I wanted to remove special, because if there's gonna be a special meeting called and you're out of country or out of city and can't be there, and can't dial in, then you'd be dinged for it. It's by no fault of your own. So,
Yeah, I don't care. I don't think it matters. And these things cover it, so we can leave it or, I mean, we can leave it or leave it in there.
I'm
and take it out.
fine with the way it looks like here, except to remove the "and special."
And add the rolling 12-month period.
Or consecutive, yeah.
I don't know if, I understand the point of being up here because we were elected to be here,
Mhm.
and I agree with that fully. But, illness or family emergency are reasons to not be here. Your livelihood's also a good one, so I can understand business being one. That being said, I don't know if you need to define every single excuse possible and put a number on it. I mean, the goal is just to be here, so.
Mhm. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay. Well,
So
does it
leave
mean
this as
includes
it
illness
is.
or family emergency? Yeah, I would be fine.
But remove special meetings and change the calendar language as
Rolling.
Council President Moore suggested.
Correct. Would you like to sit?
No, I'm fine. Thank
Okay,
you.
I wanted to offer that to you.
I
because
appreciate it, but I am good, thank you.
She's probably struggling up there.
It is a standing, well, pardon the pun. It's a standing offer, but if you'd like to return to your seat at any time.
Thank
This
you.
might take a long time.
Thank you.
So I want to make sure you had the opportunity.
I would prefer to stand right now,
Okay,
thank you.
okay, no problem.
All right, so consensus to leave this as it is on this slide, but remove special meetings and change the calendar language.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. So Chapter 3C, Bullets 1, 7, and 8. The governing body has expressed a desire to clarify expectations regarding communication with the city administrator and staff. Staff suggests combining Chapter 3C current bullet points 1, 7, and 8 as follows. Communicate with the city administrator or the appropriate department director and CC the city administrator directly on issues and concerns, request for information or research on a given topic, and questions on city council agenda items. Responses will be copied to all governing body members. In light of the new team culture desired by the governing body, this allows for a more open interpretation regarding communication with staff and ensures that everyone on the team has been provided with the same information. Would the governing body prefer to add this clarification regarding communications with the city administrator and staff, or to leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently?
As long as directors are all right with this particular approach, I don't see a problem. And obviously, city administrator coordinates all responses. That's the other piece that,
And
You
make
know.
home for the department director.
yes, and it would,
This
yes.
was intended to be the new team thing.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct,
I like it.
absolutely.
I
That's
like
good.
it. Yeah, I
I'd
like
like,
it.
I'd like to see an and slash in front of the or.
And slash in front of the or. Yeah, right, that's what I'm
City
saying.
administrator
And or.
or
Yes.
the appropriate. Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
We can do that.
I liked it the other way, just so you know.
Well, you know,
I like
it says-
and/slash
well, it says,
They
it says,
think- everybody
and,
thinks
well, it
we
says,
agree.
and CC the city administrator, so you're actually, it is and/or.
Oh,
Because-
well, we don't need that parenthetical in.
Well, no, because you don't want to have a direct communication with the department director and not include the city
Well, if you
administrator.
took out the section in the parentheses and changed the or to an and, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then you could do that too.
Word nerd.
yeah, I mean,
Hey.
I'm just, needs to be,
I don't know.
needs to be concise,
Okay.
easy to read,
Yeah.
We'll
make
it
it
work.
concise.
All right, so I'm hearing consensus to add that and change ands and ors around.
Yes,
Per Councilmember Moore's
thank you.
direction.
Thank you.
Okay.
He'll sleep better.
All right. Chapter 5A, quorum subsection. Governing body members have suggested the council consider providing additional substance to the sentence in such a manner and under such penalties as the council by ordinance may have previously prescribed. The council currently refers to Robert's Rules of Order for items not outlined in governing body rules of procedure. After extensive research and consultation with legal counsel, staff would like to suggest providing clarification on the censure process as outlined in Robert's Rules of Order. This helps to avoid misunderstandings as to how and when the censure process may be initiated and assist in limiting liability for the governing body during the process. Please note that, per City Attorney Denk, the governing body does have the authority to prescribe a procedure other than that outlined in Robert's Rules for censure. That being said, a censure process without due process to allow for a name clearing hearing risks significant exposure based upon the substantive due process rights of the member of the governing body who may be censured. Additionally, the censure would also need to be factually based, or else the city would run the risk of a libel slander action. So any questions you have on this, I'm going to defer to Attorney Deng.
All right, Ryan.
My
Ding, ding, ding. Okay.
opinion very well. So,
Sure.
so you all can decide on a different process other than what we were talking about when we've talked about censure in the past. Robert's Rules of Order has a very extensive process that you have to follow. They refer to a committee. There's a trial. There's all of that. Basic due process doesn't necessarily require that much process as is laid out in Robert's Rules of Order. So, if you were looking to kind of truncate that whole process, you could do that. But again, my recommendation is, particularly if you're taking action against a member of the body and censuring them, that they would have some due process rights to
Sure.
to basically kind of
Defend themselves.
stand up for their position and have their case heard.
Okay, so I know the censure has a specific definition, okay, and we've talked about this over and over and over again, and it's been like back and forth and round and round. What we're not looking for necessarily is an opportunity to censure. I don't think anybody's looking for an opportunity to do anything like that. I think what we're looking at is, okay, if somebody violates the rules of procedure, there's got to be some consequence, okay? Now, the consequence to us is basically we self-govern. I mean, the governing body, the members of this council govern themselves. And so, because there's no legal repercussions to anything that happens here. There are sometimes, like with coma and those kind of things. But the question I've got, Ryan, is what about a simple reprimand? Is a simple reprimand considered a censure?
In essence, is the same. Under Robert's rules, there are only a few prescribed means of disciplining a member of the body. A reprimand, a censure,
Yes.
in essence, it's a kind of an action of the body to
Discipline.
reprimand, to discipline
Yeah.
the member of the body. Short of a recall election, which is a statutory procedure in Kansas, And then it goes to the electorate, and the electorate can decide on whether they want to recall somebody, and we've had those in Kansas.
We've had
We've
them
had
in
those in
Gardner.
Gardner.
Yeah, you've had them, well, I wasn't here, but yes, you have had them in Gardner. So, you know, that's kind of the statutorily prescribed discipline for an elected member.
Sure.
And that process basically recognizes that it's not the fellow members of your body up here who put that person in their seat.
Mhm.
It's the electorate that did that. And so
Correct.
that, in essence, is a recognition that if it's the electorate that puts somebody in their seat, then the only body of people who could remove somebody from
Mhm.
being placed in that seat is that same group of people who put them there.
Correct.
So a censure is, you know, is something more akin to, or a recognition of, you, once you become a member of this body, then there are certain protocols that we expect you to abide by as a member of this body.
Yep.
And so that in essence is what censure is. And if it's, you know, we talked about before, if it's something that happens immediately in the meeting and there's a motion for censure right thereafter, you know, you don't have to have the trial because all the witnesses are here in the meeting and you can censure immediately. But if there's something more attenuated, that you need to call witnesses, people weren't there, then what Robert's Rules suggests is this due process procedure. So like I said, you can establish whatever procedure you want in providing that member due process.
Well, I think that obviously if there is what is due process? Due process is presenting evidence, calling witnesses, allowing the person being accused to call witnesses. That's
It's actually not even that.
Or
I mean,
establish their
the
case.
Due process at its most base fundamental level is being presented with the charges that are being leveled against you and being given an opportunity to be
to
heard.
rebut. Yeah, to rebut. Yes.
That at its most basic level, that's the minimum amount of due process that each and every one of you sitting up there is entitled to. Because once
Absolutely.
you're elected to your position, you then have it's considered a property interest.
Yep.
But it's your property is your due process in your elected seat, and you're
Correct.
entitled to what is referred to as a name clearing hearing, and the basest minimal amount of due process that you're entitled to there is what I just mentioned.
And that's, I think, what we're looking for with regard to a reprimand. I don't think that we need to have a huge, long, drawn-out process as prescribed in Robert's Rules. What we're looking for is, you know, you have basically the presentation of the case by the person who's censuring, and then you have a rebuttal from the person who's subject to censure or subject to reprimand. Am I not mistaken on that?
Yeah, I mean that's
So-
that's the minimum amount you should award somebody.
So I think that there needs to be some clarification. I think that in order for us to have a Robert's Rules with any teeth, and I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from the body, is that they'd like to see some teeth in Robert's Rules in the governing body rules of procedure, that we would have to. Yes. Sorry, Mark.
You're fine, you're fine. So, I don't see a reprimand as, I mean, if the reprimand, let's say we figure out a process for a reprimand. What, we keep track and after 5 you get tarred and feathered? I mean, what's the point,
Well, there's-
right?
yeah,
So,
well-
the only time that I think you really care if there's a reprimand is not so much to call out somebody. I mean, yes, that's happening. It's because everybody can see what's happening right
respect
here.
the process.
It's if somebody does something behind closed doors, leaks confidential information, does something that the public isn't aware of, and it's to reduce liability to the rest, to say that wasn't our official position, not to call out that person and say, you know, shame on you, right? So to me, it would be better to find a process that, I don't know what it is, but you call something and then we say, I did not support X. You don't have to say who did what even. Just
Well,
to clear
If
the
it's a
air.
reprimand, then the reprimand has to, you know.
You don't have to say that somebody did something for you to say, I did not do something.
Okay, so I
That's
see
my
what you're
point.
saying. So what you're saying is a poll of the governing body with regard to said statement that might have been disclosed would be
Something
sufficient.
like that, yes.
Would be sufficient. Well, that's for that statement. That doesn't include other violations of
Agreed.
the governing body rules of
But
procedure.
if you violate any of these other things and it's in public, the electorate can remove us at the next election, by all means. That's their job. So I don't know why we need to slap each other on the wrist for things that is already in the public view. It's only for the stuff that's not in public view.
Right. Like violating executive
Right.
session privilege or whatever, attorney-client privilege. It seems like those things, if we were to come up with a process, to afford each member due process, it seems like we should do that in executive session.
Right.
And then the result of that would be bringing a motion forth for censure. Because really, the censure is just a formal recognition.
So I don't know that COMA would allow for that, because COMA only allows for executive session for, and I looked at this when we looked at censure before, it only allows for executive session for personnel matters relating to non-elected personnel.
Correct. Not elected.
So when you're talking about elected personnel, at least when I looked at this, back in 17, none of the exceptions to COMA appeared to be applicable to that situation.
Which is what causes the problem.
So I think that process would have to happen in an open public meeting.
Hmm.
I don't know why we want to reinvent the wheel when it's already spelled out in Robert's Rules of Order.
Well, I just think that process is very long and tedious and draws us into, a side show from what we're trying to do just because
But that's the
somebody
whole
did
point.
something.
But that's the whole point. The whole point of that process is to make it as unpalatable as possible to go down that route. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. So if everything has to be done in the public, including if we have to hold a trial to determine whether or not, let's use the example, the easiest example I can think of is leaking information out of an executive session.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that probably all of us would want to tar and feather a guy over that's sitting up here. Let's say that somebody violates that. The due process that we would afford through any kind of process would further exacerbate that leak if we
Well,
have
yeah.
to do it in the public.
Mhm.
So that's why it doesn't make any sense to me that we would have anything in here for censure. If that's, in fact, if what Ryan's saying is true, that
Mhm.
we could not, because of COMA, have all of that behind closed doors, come up with have a verdict that we all arrive at, then come out and vote on a motion to censure at that point.
Yeah.
If we can't do that because the law says we can't do that, then what's the point of having
right.
anything in here?
Very much.
Yeah.
I mean, if you keep track of these things, even if it's not in executive session, and you get called out on 10 of these things that we just changed or are going to change, if
Okay.
at the end of the day we can't do much about it, I mean, I'm all for guidelines, that's fine. But if we're going to put something in there, we've got to be able to do something with it.
Yeah. So the idea of the motion to censure, or the resolution to censure, is simply that the body formally recognizes the wrongdoing by a member of the body. That's all it is. It's not. It doesn't have any formal, no punishment or anything like that. No sanctions that go along with that. It's just us deciding as a body that what that behavior was is not acceptable to the body. But yeah, if there's no way to arrive at that decision without exacerbating or dragging it all out in the public, and there's really no point.
Okay, so are we going to then dispense with 5A, the clarification on penalties?
Let me ask Ryan a question. So let's say you don't go through a motion of censure, but in council updates you say, I disagree with
You can
Rich
use
doing
me.
X,
Right.
right?
Well,
And others agree. Do we have to do anything after that? I mean, Because then we've essentially cleared the air. I don't necessarily have to divulge what he did or didn't do, but I disagree with whatever you did.
Me too. I'll just be on the record with that.
Yeah,
And that happens all the time, it's just when you.
I think we've done that up here.
Right.
You're just saying make it not a formal
Right.
condemnation.
Do we have to go through the PIO with that, or?
Yeah.
And say, in my opinion, Councilmember X violated the spirit, if not the letter, of the governing body rules of procedure in this regard.
Yeah.
Sure.
And say, this is my statement, this is my opinion, and you can leave it at that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to have any due process at that point because it's not a motion of censure.
No.
Okay.
All right.
But we still have censure capability, correct? So
Oh.
we would leave that in as.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be the
If
Robert's
there was
rules
a
and
severe,
process. Yes.
that we wanted to drag out, yeah, okay.
Todd's counting down the days until I do it.
But yeah, the whole that
Right.
process in Robert's rules is definitely,
It's a disincentive.
it's a
Right.
disincentive, yeah. It will, yeah, because this thing would drag out. and it
Chews
would
up
be-
time and.
Okay.
Okay,
And the
so
court of public opinion would not be kind.
Yeah.
I'm hearing consensus to leave it as it is because that is what that sentence alludes to is Robert's Rules of
Mhm.
Order.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Chapter 5B currently reads, council members may submit items for inclusion on future agendas by orally making the request during council comments or by submitting a written request to the city administrator or the mayor. Governing body members have suggested the council may wish to consider adding clarification regarding agenda item submission, such as deadline for including items. In terms of clarification, staff suggests changing the verbiage to submitting a written request to the mayor and the city administrator. This would make it less likely that the item would be overlooked, as it would go to two parties, and would allow for follow-up from each party in order to determine if and when the item would be added to the agenda. Would the governing body prefer to add this clarification regarding agenda item submission or leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently?
I like it.
I like it, yep.
Okay, so consensus to add "and" there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Council previously indicated they would like to consider language allowing items to be added until 12 p.m. on the Thursday the agenda packet is distributed. Staff has considered this in conjunction with the average time it takes to prepare an item and would like to ask that this be reconsidered to 12 p.m. on the Wednesday immediately prior to the distribution of the agenda packet in order to allow staff the opportunity to fully create the requested agenda item. This is only 24 hours sooner than council's initial request and still allows for the initial packet to be distributed prior to this deadline. Language could additionally be added allowing for flexibility in the event of an emergency. Please note that the farther in advance staff is made aware of an item to be included, the better. More complicated items, such as those involving ordinance changes or extensive research, may not be able to be included in the final packet, even if this Wednesday deadline is met. Would the governing body prefer to change the submission deadline as indicated above to 12 p.m. on Wednesday, or leave it as originally indicated, 12 p.m. on Thursday?
Let's go with this.
Yeah, I like Wednesday because it allows us to do additional research or staff to be able to add additional information that we may not have access to at the time.
Amy,
So-
just to clarify, does that stay in line with the 72-hour advance?
That's Thursday at 5 p.m.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the 72 hours is actually Friday at 7 p.m., but staff gets it to you more than 24 hours earlier than that.
Yeah,
We
thank you.
overperform.
I'm sorry?
Our staff overperforms.
They have for a long time.
Yes, they have.
Okay, so consensus to change both of those items. Staff, in concurrence with Dave Knopfick, the consultant working with economic development, have suggested the city incorporate a planning and zoning consent agenda as part of the normal city council meeting agendas. The purpose of this is for brevity. These items have already been studied in depth and approved by the Planning Commission, making it somewhat redundant to have a presentation on them for council as well. Staff would like this to be a separate consent agenda so that it better shows these items have come from the Planning Commission. As with any consent item, the council can always pull the item should they wish to learn more about it. This would not apply to ordinances or resolutions as they require a roll call vote. Would the governing body prefer to add this agenda item section or to leave governing body rules of procedure as it is currently?
The only clarification I'd like to see with this is if they've received a recommendation from the planning commission, but it's not unanimous, I think it needs to be excluded from that consent agenda. It needs to go to regular. Because if there's a lack of unanimity, it's not like something that's, basically a rubber stamp, then I'd like to see that come to regular. So what we would say is if they've already received a unanimous recommendation from the planning commission instead of just recommendation.
Would you do the same with committee recommendations?
Yeah, that's just.
Most committee recommendations are eligible to be put on the consent agenda currently,
Yes.
like many of your UAC
Right.
items and some public works items go on the regular
I don't
consent
mean the
agenda.
separate area, I mean the unanimous versus non-unanimous.
Could we just, instead of not, I mean, just to make it simpler, could we just include what the vote was?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Down at the
You could include that on your CAF,
Like
possibly.
each item that you put in the consent agenda would have its own
5
vote.
to 1 or whatever.
And then
5 to
you can
1.
pull
Well,
it if you
the
don't.
staff already does, sorry, Larry, go ahead.
That information is usually included at the end of the motion. My only concern with what the mayor was saying earlier that I was going to question is we've only had once or twice in the last 3 years an abstention
Yep.
for a very good reason.
Like conflict of
And
interest,
so
for
that
example.
would still be basically a unanimous vote.
Yes,
But I wanted to make sure that that was the way you saw that.
correct. And essentially it's not considered part of the vote. It's actually, it's a declaration that I am not voting.
Yeah.
So, yes, that's not considered if it's unanimous amongst the voting members, the ones that choose to vote.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking for is on the agenda itself, with each item, have the vote right next to it, so we can see.
So, for any committee recommendations.
For any committee recommendation.
Yeah.
I don't think you need it to be unanimous, though. This item would have been a new business item, and staff already puts together the entire packet. You can
Right.
see everything that went to planning commission, what the minutes were, notes, everything's in there. All we have to do is read it.
So
So
if it come-
if you want to add the line right there so it's easy to see, 4-2,
Yeah.
that's fine. But I don't think unanimous is a requirement. If the committee went forward with it 3-2, let us look at it.
Yeah, I agree,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're diluting the vote and having a pre-qualifier.
Yeah, I think well, each of us can have our own pre-qualifier if it's a 3-2
fair.
vote.
If you can remove it, if you have the
Yeah.
ability to remove it from a consent agenda.
Yeah, no matter whether it's unanimous or not.
And they would be
Right.
considered separately, so committee recommendation consent agenda or planning and zoning consent agenda would be considered separately from regular consent agenda. So we could take those off and discuss.
Yeah, it says,
What I don't want is for staff to have to complete two separate packets, one for planning commission, one for council, and then have to do the presentation again and have that particular presentation subject to public comment again, okay, over and above the public hearing that may have already taken place. And I think Dave makes a very good argument when he discusses this. We have to be able to respect the process of the planning commission.
Mhm.
So the planning commission is where the heavy lifting is supposed to be done. And there's, it should be, well, it's quasi judicial, so it's close. I mean, we have to override whatever the recommendation is with a supermajority. But I don't want that developer to have to go through the mill twice. And right now, we're having them go through the mill twice.
I don't think they would if you move it from new business to this new planning and zoning
Well,
consent.
that's
agenda.
exactly, that's the whole point of this. That's
Yeah.
the reason why.
I think this is a great idea.
Yeah, this is good.
So-
yeah. And I would take it a step further and play off of what Mark said, is that each council member can take the time to read the presentation, as you said, look at the vote, and then if we do have questions on an individual basis, shoot it to the director and CC the city administrator for that 1 or 2 questions, which is open record, so it's not a big deal. And then you've either A, got your answer and you don't need to ask it, or B, role playing here, Larry. Hey, Larry, be prepared. I'll ask that question, Monday night, and we'll move forward without having to go through the whole presentation, to your point, Mayor. Okay.
Right, and even if you pull it off the consent agenda, the new consent agenda, I don't think we necessarily need the whole presentation.
No.
We just have to answer whatever the question is and
Whatever the
move on.
questions are.
Yeah.
All right.
I think that streamlines it.
So we'll add the planning and zoning consent. We won't put any qualifiers on it. All recommendations that don't require a roll call vote will be placed on the on that consent agenda for all committee recommendations. That would include any other advisory or
Well, there's already a committee
committees or
recommendations line
commissions.
item, so
Right.
they can stay there.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts? Okay.
Now that you have provided additional direction, staff will work to make these final adjustments with the assistance of legal counsel as warranted. Please note that this process may potentially include the amendment of several ordinances as well as the development of new ordinances. Staff anticipates this will be complete by the second meeting in March, at which time the updated version of governing body rules of procedure and all associated ordinances will be brought before the council to be voted upon, as all of these items will need to be considered during the same council meeting. Once the red line version of governing body rules of procedure is complete, it will be sent out well in advance of this, but you will need to consider all of these items at once, which is the reason for the timeline of the second meeting in March, as there will be multiple ordinances potentially involved in this. Do you have any additional questions at this time?
Good work.
Yeah, good work.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Amy.
All right, thank you.
Very well done. All right, moving on to public comments. Thank you very much, by the way, for the very civil and substantive discussion we had up here. That was good.
I missed my chance.
I know. Well, you had it. You blew it.
Carry on.
Take my notes.
Public comments.
Mayor.
Yes,
Regarding that item,
correct.
I do have one question. Is it possible to move public comments before the presentation?
I think that might be a good
So
idea.
people don't have to sit here for an hour if they want to speak, and if we have presentations when we commonly
There
do,
was
is
some
there a
reason
problem
we
with
didn't
that?
do
Yeah, you
There's-
guys had a reason a couple of years ago.
Yes.
May I?
Yes. The,
Well, there's two ways to look at that. Oftentimes, your presentations may include consultants and, or guest, in addition to your public. They're also guests. So it's a coin flip. It's your decision, but typically the presentations were that way.
So often, in other words, often the folks that are waiting are paying the bill for the consultants that are also waiting.
And, and one's costing you money, and the other one's costing you time.
Right.
you know, there is an opportunity in a case-by-case situation where if you know that the presentation topic is not going to be involving a action pending before the body, you know, that later that evening, that we can pull that off and or we can rearrange that order of business at that point.
I think that'd be a good idea. Anytime we can speed up the process to allow the public to get their voice out
Yep.
and it not cost extra for all of us as well, that's great.
Okay.
Noted.
All right, thank you. All right, public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. We do not have a public hearing this evening, and we have a very light agenda, so I will open up the podium for public comment. If you have any need or urge to come before the body and speak your mind, feel free to. I just ask that you adhere to the 5-minute time limit, as well as the request not to have any profanity or personal attacks. With that being said, the podium is now open. Please state your name and address if you come forward. Seeing none.
Participation.
Yes, I know. We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Melton, second Winters, that we approve the consent agenda. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. There are no committee recommendations this evening. There is no old business this evening. New business item number 1 has been struck from the agenda, and so now we only have new business item number 2. Consider approval of the 2019 state legislative agenda, and Amy's making the presentation this evening. I think last year it was Matt that made the presentation, so. Well, I'm moving up.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Remember
I'm
the
good.
mayor?
Okay, yes, it's a standing order. It's a standing order or a standing offer.
And
Yes.
This one should be a little bit shorter.
Okay,
so-
great.
All right, the purpose of the state legislative agenda is to provide city council and staff a list of legislative topics that are of particular interest to follow for the city. By outlining the agenda, both council and staff will be prepared to respond to legislators and professional organizations regarding the impact proposed legislation has on the city of Gardner. By participating in this process, the city is pursuing legislative policies that seek to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of local government operations for Gardner. The city's legislative agenda incorporates the joint city-county platform to assert our common positions to all of our state legislators. The county has requested this practice continue and has hosted a meeting with area managers. To develop Gardner's 2019 legislative agenda, staff worked together and utilized the consensus provided by the governing body for the 2018 state legislative agenda as a starting point. Much of the 2019 agenda remains the same, though there have been some instances where those items that are joint with Johnson County have had their wording tweaked slightly to match the verbiage utilized by Johnson County and to account for recent events and/or changes. There are 9 items included in the City of Gardner's 2019 state legislative agenda: home rule and local control, tax policy, CAPERS funding, transportation issues, K-12 education financing, local control of right-of-way, development of a comprehensive economic development plan for the state of Kansas, statewide expansion of Medicaid, and the dark store theory. Most of these items are very consistent in substance with the same items as presented to the council as part of the 2018 state legislative agenda. Nearly all of these items are joint with Johnson County. Of the listed items, the most substantial changes are as follows. Under tax policy, the city has added collection of compensating use tax on remote sales. This is a joint item with Johnson County in which Gardner encourages the Kansas legislature to pass legislation facilitating the collection of compensating use tax from purchases made from sellers with no physical presence in a state, based on the U.S. Supreme Court decision in South Dakota versus Wayfair. Sales tax collected should be distributed using existing methods and formulas for the state and local governments. And under transportation issues, Public Works Director Michael Kramer has updated the list of projects to more closely match the current major projects being undertaken by the City of Gardner. Staff would like to suggest that the City Council approve the 2019 state legislative agenda for the City of Gardner.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Amy. Any public comment on new business item number 2? Seeing none, any questions or comments for city staff or city clerk or city administration on this particular item? Go ahead.
I'll do it. So number 8, statewide expansion of Medicaid. I would like to see us put something in that says, you know, we're something about Medicaid, but you know, from the research I've done, Medicaid is wrought with fraud, and there's a lot of it out there, and there's not a lot being investigated. So I don't like the expansion of something where there's a lot of potential fraud, and none of it's being investigated. So I would like to see us chime in with that. I'm kind of against increasing a budget when we don't know that it's all being used correctly.
So are so you're saying, and you're saying that you're opposed to statewide expansion of Medicaid?
Yes.
Because of the fraud endemic in the system?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I agree. I would be okay with striking number 5, K-12 education financing. And the reason is not because I'm against financing our schools properly, but because just as that's written, and the issue that we have at the state level is adequately and equitably has still not been properly defined at a state level.
Right.
Let alone the world-class education that's already in quotes because they can't define that. So I don't like attaching my name to say that I support a pie in the sky, some number that we don't know at this point in time.
I agree with that.
If we wanted to make a statement that says we're supportive of our school system and funding it at a, I don't want to use the word adequately.
Reasonable?
At a
reasonable?
Even current level.
Right.
Would be,
Optimum.
I mean, because the current level has already been mandated from the judicial branch
Yeah.
as to what's changing. So it's not like there's a lot of control right there.
I don't think there's a lot of control of the process anywhere, to be honest with
story.
you. But maybe something to be said of, we're highly supportive of our, of the efforts by our public school districts to manage their costs in an effective manner, to maximize the return of funds to the classroom. And we encourage the state legislature to quickly define fair and equitable, the legislature to define fair and equitable within the context of the Kansas Constitution and leave it at that.
Yeah.
I'd be good with that.
Yes.
I'm okay with
But
that.
if we did
Yep.
that, we'd have to remove the joint with Johnson County from that. Yes.
Yes.
I'm okay with that, the way that's worded.
Yes.
I like that.
I mean,
Right, it's wordy, but it works.
go back to the tape.
Yeah.
The basic gist of it is we want the state legislature to decide what's equitable and
Yeah,
fair.
we strongly encourage that the state legislature, define that within the context of the Kansas Constitution, which is,
Yep.
I think, is where it needs to be. It doesn't need to be in the courts. It needs to be in the Constitution of the state of Kansas. And, it is there, but it's not defined, it's not clarified. So it's going to require a constitutional amendment to clarify it.
Okay, staff can make that change.
All right. Yes.
So I'm not sure I heard a consensus for Medicaid. All I'm saying, and I don't have an opinion, obviously, I'm just saying what you have on this paper before you is where we started. Well, the directive
Last
was
year.
last year. So if you want to change it, I didn't catch what changes unless Ms. Nasta did.
I'm good with striking the entire thing.
Don't comment on statewide expansion of Medicaid.
Don't comment.
No comment at all. Strike number 8.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Understand, we concluded it last year because the consensus amongst the body was that, well, these aren't really binding anyway, and so
Right.
we want to be able
Yeah,
to show
and that was a
solidarity
mistake.
with Johnson County.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Okay, all right,
Yeah,
all right. So
I
we'll
mean,
strike it.
after looking into it more over this last year, it's amazing how much fraud is out there that's not being investigated. So I can send you guys a link.
I was
to a
against it
video.
then, I'm against it.
Government
Well,
program.
I'm not necessarily against Medicaid, but I don't know enough about the fraud and the
Right.
other
I'm
issues.
not
and
against
so
Medicaid either.
I'm not
It's-
opposed to striking it because,
That way, don't take a position one way or the
yeah,
other.
I mean, it's a more neutral stand, but.
Mhm.
yeah, it's a tough one for me too, because I understand why Johnson County supports it.
So do I. Johnson County
Johnson
shares
County,
shared services.
As Johnson County, we could say, hey, look, we want to investigate the fraud to make sure that that stuff's not cleared up.
Well, and Johnson County's going to support it. It just doesn't mean we have to jump up there with them.
Right.
Randy? Weigh in? Okay, all right. So we'll strike number 8. All right. And then, what was the other? Dark store is considered its own section, and I understand why. But wouldn't that come in under taxation or tax policy?
It falls under its own section in Johnson County's legislative agenda
Correct.
as well. So
They're-
it falls
they're not
separately
worried
in there,
about
which is part of the reason why we put it separately in ours, because it's separate in theirs.
Okay.
Maybe the city attorney can help me. My thought on this is that it's not really a policy at this point. It's just something that's happening and they're having to defend it in the courts.
Well, it's beyond just defending it. I mean, there are several.
They're losing.
They're losing cases.
Right.
Yeah, they're losing cases, and it's going to go to the Kansas Supreme Court probably for an appeal. But it's not looking good.
So that's probably why it's separate.
Yeah, I think if I were to make a change to that, it would probably be to make it more generic. It's fine that it's under the title Dark Store Theory, but I think we want to guard against somebody changing the name of it to something else. When what we're really after is any theory or any model of operation that suggests an occupied big box stores could be valued as if vacant, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Fair? Yeah. Yeah, because dark store is actually, it's a term that critics use. The supporters call it a more fair and accurate representation of the actual value of the brick and mortar store. And so it's like, well, I understand that. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep their liabilities down because brick and mortar stores are suffering right now under competition from online retailers. That's really what it comes down to, is they're trying to claw back some of those costs. One way they're doing it is through this.
We could refer to it just as commercial valuation and our stance on that.
Yeah, commercial valuation sounds good.
Good to me.
And then
I like it.
remove based on dark store theory.
Oh, yeah.
So it just says, which suggests blah, blah, blah. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, because although the distribution centers that we have here in our city limits are not commercial sites with forward doors that sell you something.
Yep.
I think that's another concern that I have, is that we do have a little over almost 2 million square feet in two buildings,
Mhm.
that if the lease comes up and they find a better deal down the road,
Now we're stuck with that.
well, yeah, sure, but I think that could apply to this as well, so
Mhm.
I think
Well, it's
commercial
going to. It's going to.
versus
They will
big
go.
box.
They
Okay.
will go to industrial next.
Fair enough.
That's the point of this. So, all right, so we have consensus?
Yep.
On
Yep.
that? Okay, great. Anything else that you see here? I like the work that was done by Michael and his staff on the projects. Very well done. Aviation funding for from KDOT.
The transportation stuff.
All that transportation stuff was very, very good. Local control of right-of-way, that's becoming more and more of an issue every day. So I'm glad to see it's being addressed by this agenda. Anything else? There is something in here on the property tax lid. This is different from Johnson County. Johnson County's position is it needs to be repealed in its entirety. Okay? So I just want to make sure that you all know that. If you're comfortable with this, we can move forward.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion on the
So moved.
legislative as amended. So
Second.
Okay, motion Gregorczyk, second Baldwin, that we approve the 2019 legislative agenda for the city of Gardner as amended by action from the body. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, any abstentions? New business agenda item number 2 passes. All right, let's go on to council updates. Staff have anything for council? I'm going to start with Gons Garcia, Public Utilities.
Yes, just a quick update on the Hillsdale expansion. On Friday, we received three companies submitted their qualifications for the design build of the 2 million gallon per day Hillsdale expansion. We already formed a selection committee, and the next step is to review their qualifications. Following that, we'll have a interview each qualified company.
Great. Thanks, Gons. Economic Development, Larry Powell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of quick items for you. I sent out a Friday Minute memo last Friday that basically was to bring to your attention the fact that staff has, as have most of the cities in Johnson County, started a review of the 2018 industrial, the IRC, the International Residential Code, which has within it, of course, many other booklets that we're familiar with, the fire code, the gas code, the electric code, all the other many things that we talk about. And basically, the review that we're going through, we're expecting to be completed sometime in the second quarter, and we'd like to bring then some recommendations to you as to the adoption of the 2018. We did not adopt the 2015 code. There was not enough changes brought forth in that code that we felt that was any real advantage to adopt it. So we're under the 2012 currently. We also did not adopt the 2009 code for the same reason. And so you've had actually one code change in the last 12 years. And it's something that we feel that the 2018 does appear to have some significant changes in it, modifications, alterations, etc. And we're actually using the other cities' reviews to help bolster our reviews. So we're looking at the material that we received from Overland Park, Lenex, and some others that have already been through their review process, and they held a number of meetings with their developers in their area. And since most of their developers are also our developers, they're they've been exposed to this process already for the last couple of months. So we're expecting to move forward with that, and we just want you to know that we'll be doing that, and that you may have some questions from time to time, or hear questions, and we'll be bringing that to you at a later date. The second item would be that the February Planning Commission has an item on it. We have a major project that's being reviewed in February on the fourth Tuesday of the month, and it has a name of the, was called Waverly Point, and the application was changed to say Waverly Plaza. So the actual name of the project is the Waverly Plaza Project. Amy, if you could bring up that map for me just quickly. This has been set out on social media. It is part of our public packet record, so it's not anything that's, you know, a secret or anything like that. Basically, the project is located at the northeast corner of Waverly and Santa Fe, directly below the high school. And some of the comments online that we've been receiving and some of the calls that we're receiving, we felt it was necessary to maybe just take a few minutes and talk about some of those things for you. First of all, this is a dual project. Approximately the east half of the project would be market value apartments. They have nothing to do whatsoever with any kind of Section 8 housing or HUD housing or anything else. These are all market-driven apartments paid for by the developer. They will not have any support of any kind from any special tax write-off or anything like that. The commercial side of the property is the west half, and it does contain a number of buildings that in the current configuration would be many different retail stores. We don't have actual types yet or the kinds of stores, but there would be the normal things that you would see in a normal strip center. There would be restaurants, there would be banking facilities or credit unions of some type, and there will be, we hope, some office and business, medical facilities, etc., scattered throughout this. The main part that's causing the commotion that right now we're receiving is the clubhouse section, and the property is currently zoned with two current zones. It is both commercial and residential. The new zoning is actually the same zoning. We're not changing the zoning. It is going from an R3 and a C2 to a CP2 and an RP2, which just means the whole thing is a planned development. The 2 and the 3 are the same zoning characteristics, so there's no change in zoning in this, other than the fact that the whole thing will be a planned district, which in and of itself is a zoning change. So therein lies the reason for going to the Planning Commission with step 1 for the zoning change. The second part then is the configuration of the property. Of course, the original plan zones for the commercial plan zone was a little bit larger than what you see here. Residential was a little bit smaller. And so this is more equitably putting those two in the correct configuration that you see. The calls that we're getting for the clubhouse are the people that currently live in the row houses in the area directly south of the proposed clubhouse area are concerned that the original property behind them was to be another residential unit. The property owner that had that property did sell that property to the developer for the other property, so he no longer owns it, and so he's out of the mix as far as the development of the property is concerned. And there was some confusion on the street names and the issues. So 174th Street here might become what we call Washington Street, and Laurel Street is actually an existing street that was already platted in this configuration. This is not a new street, it's just never been built to date yet. Same thing with 174th. It's been previously platted in the past, and it's in the same configuration on this plat. It's not really a new street, it's just never been constructed as far as bringing it into existence. So we're just trying to get some information out about this. We'll probably wind up needing to have maybe a meeting with property owners in the area separate from the planned use. We'll see how many more concern calls we get that we need to see if that's a valid reason to have a joint meeting with property owners. We've really only had 2 calls from the people that live in the condo units, but we've had some other commercial calls as well that were just interested in basically what the concept is and what's going in. So,
Sure.
Does anybody have any quick questions that I've missed maybe in that?
I have one real quick. I noticed that, we have sidewalks on 174th, but there's nothing on West Santa Fe or on Waverly, so.
And I could let
that might
Michael
be
answer
fine.
that, but Santa Fe actually is being totally rebuilt from where the Y is
Right.
west to the intersection. And as part of that project, there actually is a trail sidewalk on the north side, which will be 10-foot wide.
Okay.
And a regular sidewalk on the south side. And then there will also be additional sidewalks up Waverly to the school. So
I
we
just
will
wanted to
be
make sure
improving,
Yeah.
we will be improving the sidewalks in
Thank
the
you.
area tremendously.
Right.
I-
That question was gonna come from somebody.
I would just like to say I'm really excited about this, and
Me
I don't
too.
care what the Facebook says.
The Facebook?
I read the Facebook post on it, and I can't believe the things that people will complain about. This brings retail, it brings more housing, affordable housing. I don't know what there is to complain about here. This is going to be awesome.
Do we get a pool pass? Did anybody ask? Is that-
Yeah.
So the question I had is, from a traffic perspective, will we take a look at lighting at the end of 174th where it intersects with Waverly, and then lighting also at Santa Fe and Waverly once we know what that compression looks like?
Well, there's gonna be a light at Santa Fe and Waverly anyway. That's the
You
plan.
mean street lighting or? are you
Yes, sir,
talking
I'm
about-
sorry.
Okay, street lighting, of
Traffic
course.
lighting, I'm sorry, traffic.
Yeah, traffic lights.
There is a traffic study required by the developer, which is yet to be developed and we have not received, so those types of lighting decisions are actually part of the parcel of the traffic study, and Public Works will be reviewing.
I mean, I've hung out at that intersection there at the gas station on the south side of Santa Fe, and especially during school time, it's atrocious. So to add, and I'm with Lee, that this is great development. I'm sure the folks out there where Mark lives and west of you are excited about not having to drive all the way through town, et cetera. But the traffic during the school year is pretty heavy north and southbound on that Waverly Road.
Michael, can you speak to that? I think that the original design for this was gonna do some, gonna address signalization potentially.
Yeah,
with
and
that.
so, well, forgive me, I believe that traffic signals are included at 175th and Waverly as part of the plan, but I'm going to follow up with Tim and confirm that for you in the
Yeah,
Friday memo.
that'd be great,
if
thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you, yeah, that's absolutely great.
Well, I can tell you that in '07, when the housing to the east was being looked at, there was a little sign on the corner of Waverly and Santa Fe that has since deteriorated, came down, and the original plan had more retail in there. There were no apartments.
Correct.
And most of us over there on the west side were extremely anxious that we would get something over there. So even if it's not the entire area, this is still a benefit. So I think this is great. I hope it goes in quickly.
Wait, can Mark vote on that because he lives close?
Yes,
Has no interest.
yes, Laura?
Not $5,000.
Yes.
Before I forget, staff does have a meeting with the school to discuss traffic tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yep. And that's to discuss Waverly, the improvements to Waverly north of that intersection, up past Madison Elementary. So, yeah, I'm in that meeting as well. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, this is the public needs to understand that this development that they're seeing on the screen is only part of a very large change of traffic that's going to occur in this area, because we're improving 2 streets to 3 lanes. We're improving a major intersection. And we're looking at, as the chief has said, and as Michael has said, Public Works Director has said, that there are a number of things all over that within a mile that go into this review and what's going on for this entire area. So this is a very major project for our community, and it's one we hope is successful, of course. But if anybody has any worries, we encourage them to come to the Planning Commission meeting on the 4th Tuesday of the month, and please ask their questions. That's the purpose of that meeting, and we're there to try and answer any questions they may have. And then I have one more thing.
Yeah, please.
So staff's been doing quite a bit of review of the old justice, or the old police department, or the old justice center. I guess it's not the old justice center, the police department And as you may recall, when we voted on the project for the new Justice Center, one of the deciding factors for getting that passed was the condition of the building, and that it was not really feasible or justifiable to spend a lot of money to try and bring it up to code, nor to continue for it to exist after we moved out of it. So in the process of reviewing the whole ongoing decision-making process, the flip side of that coin is the garage part of that facility is movable, is reusable, and could be moved to some other part of the city as a project to be used in some other location, either by the Parks and Rec or Public Works or whomever. But the planning staff, in reviewing our downtown development suggestion list, basically was encouraged to look at putting together a RFP on future use of that area and other properties adjacent to it, and see if the adjacent property owners would be interested in entering into an RFP process to see what might be the use of that property in the long term. The downtown development plan did encourage for it to be redeveloped into commercial development. And the city would have to, of course, go through whatever process it goes through to decide how to get rid of that property, declare it surplus, etc. But that's in the future. Right now, what we're looking for is actually trying to find what should be the best possible use for that property, and trying to encourage some RFPs to come in for that and the adjacent properties, if the owners on each side of us would be willing, which happens to be the same property owner, would be willing to maybe look at that. So it's a more consolidated project, and maybe something larger could come in. So we're just looking for consensus, permission from you to basically start that RFP process and move forward.
Yeah, I thought that a couple of years, well, not a couple of years ago, 18 months ago, when we were looking at all that, and knowing that it was sandwiched, if you will, between the same landowner. So I think it would behoove him to consider absorbing that and making that plot more ideal for commercial growth, services, et cetera, which would probably bring a pretty penny.
That if you make that one big
Yeah,
large,
yeah.
you're talking about a significant.
And it coincides with the downtown commission, or the plan, I should say. So I'm all for it.
Yes.
Yes.
Make it so.
Thank you very much.
Card.
All right, Michael Kramer. I think we kind of stole a little bit of your thunder there, I guess, but.
Wanting to let you know that the field check plans for Phase 1 of I-35 and Gardner Road were submitted last week to KDOT. So we're awaiting those comments, and then our consultant is awaiting those. And then I wanted to thank our Parks and Rec staff and Johnson County Public Works and our Public Works staff for the tree debris location. And we had over the 2 weekends, and actually both weekends, even though this weekend was a lot nicer weather, we had about 200 or so equivalent pickup truckloads of debris each. Wow. You know, between the 2 weekends. So we had about 400 loads total that were dropped off and mulched up and there, and the Johnson County Fairgrounds is going to use that mulch for their facilities and their use, and
Great.
And we've let them know and reached out to them. If there's a little bit more than they need, we'll be happy to haul it off for them. And so just wanted to let you know about that. I think it was a good program and a good success, and we aren't planning on doing any more days. We haven't. You know, I think there's still some limbs and stuff out there, but at this time we were not planning on extending that unless someone had direction for us that said we think we should.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the limbs and tree. There are still trees that are down. In fact, we have one in my neighborhood, and if homeowners have that situation, they can't get those trees cleared because they're too big in a lot of cases, and you know. Is there anything that we can potentially do with Public Works or even with utilities, because I know that they do tree trimming and things like that? Is there any possibility that we could work with some of those homeowners to get those trees removed?
You know, I don't think
wouldn't
that's a
wanna put the city-
program that we've done anything in the past.
Or just
You know, I disagree.
volunteers, or, yes?
Well, we actually, as staff, briefly pondered this the other day with no significant vetting at all. We considered asking your permission to outsource it, since we do not have
Yeah.
the grabber equipment and whatever, and we have no idea what that would cost. So,
Sure.
you want us to investigate?
It's gonna be significant if you have a lot of trees. I mean,
Yeah, right.
we
There are
spend-
still quite a few
we
trees
spend
out
between
there.
$50 and $100,000 a year to clear, depending on the area, 3 to 20 miles
Yeah.
underneath already existing power lines that are already
lines.
semi-cleared. So
Yeah.
you're talking about a lot of money to have, ask
And
or somebody else to come in.
Again, I was just throwing it out there, sometimes it's.
One of the beautiful
See,
things
that's
about
a community
homeownership
type
is you get to
project.
take care of
Yeah,
all
I'd be
that.
worried about the liability aspect as well.
Okay, so we're looking at possibly a community service type of deal, possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I go community service before
Yeah.
we self-serve.
Let the volunteers get sued.
Yeah. Good call, Lee.
Yeah, Lee.
Just
Lay it
thinking
right
more
there.
like Ryan every day. I think.
2 guys and a chainsaw will be up and running tomorrow, so.
But what if,
Two guys and a chainsaw.
if you did have,
Well, if you've got limbs that are down, you can't take care of them, it might be good to at least let somebody know who we can possibly get in touch with, folks who could volunteer to get that
Well, I think it goes
removed.
back to what Mark said
Yeah.
a couple of meetings ago. Look at Knights of Columbus, Lions Club, put the word out
Yeah.
through that program, or excuse me, through those groups. Go ahead, ma'am.
That's okay.
Well, we're actually working on that too, and you're still in a little bit of Friday Note Thunder, but
I read
we
it.
just, it was when it wasn't out yet.
Oh,
No, he's good.
Right? We got a grant, a little bitty grant, little mini grant, to send staff to volunteer coordinator, administrator stuff training, and the only thing we have to do is let them go. That's our match. So as this has continued to evolve, this is getting bigger and bigger all the time. To be continued, we have not forgotten. That's all stems from your request. And this could conceivably add it to the list, but we'll talk about this some more as staff, if you're good with that. I've seen a lot of nods,
Yes,
so, okay.
that sounds awesome.
Particularly mini grants. I like
Mini
that.
grants are
Well, the
good.
mini grant's already awarded, so
That's
now
great.
you just got your Friday note.
Hey, good work, good work, Jen Jordan.
Less
who's
reading
not
for
Yes,
here,
I'm good with if we can
Grant staff.
be the conduit to facilitate these
Yes.
things for the
Yeah.
public.
Exactly.
Without adding to the city burden.
We're working
I
on
don't
that
wanna grow
too.
government here,
Yeah.
but if we can facilitate, that's awesome.
We'll
Yes.
get a couple of people to be conduits, that way no one person has to never go on vacation or.
Right,
Exactly.
Danica, you know, for instance.
Poor Danica.
And Jen.
All right, anything else, Michael? Okay, great. Chief?
I don't have anything.
City Clerk, you've,
No, sir.
yeah, you've had a lot tonight. How's pregnancy? Doing all right?
Yeah, it's great.
Man, I don't know what answer you thought was coming, man. But
Being the father of 5 boys, and you know, I know how difficult it can be.
Sorry, my bad. Did I say that out loud?
Finance Director? Okay, City Attorney? Okay. Laura, you have the floor.
No, I almost answered when you said finance director, so no.
No.
Good.
Okay, let's start with, we'll start with Council President tonight.
Nothing.
Anything?
I've
Nothing.
got nothing.
Council Vice President?
I got nothing.
Nothing. Wow. Dr.
Oh, wait, I did have something.
Oh.
I'm sorry, I wrote it down, I forgot. So I had a quick question about Willow Springs, the sidewalks, we had the trunk, whatever.
The truncated domes?
That's
Yeah.
right. Whatever happened with those and the installation of them? As I walked the other morning, I kind of came jumping back to me. We'd asked about them because several of them were cut off when they were,
Like
they're not
at an
complete
angle.
squares. Yeah, they're kind of weird. The way they changed the approaches when they poured the new concrete and we're gonna check on that before we paid the bill, I think, and
They still haven't been.
We're not even sure if we got all the domes that we paid for.
yeah, not all of, yeah.
So according to the documentation that we received back on that, those are in compliance.
Okay.
And as far as, you know, all of our ramps and the contractor has, you know, a bond and has indicated that they'll come back on any. If there's, you know, a specific location you'd like me to go back and review again, I'm certainly happy to do that.
I just want, you know, it just seems weird that they're cut. They're not like they're square to, like they just weren't put back the way they were. So I was going to recommend maybe this year when we write our, you know, our request for a bid, we say, you know, replace it as it was before, because there used to be nice, like right down from Randy's house, used to be a nice wide area where you could like walk and get to both sidewalks, and now it's like here's a quick 90 degrees and it's very small.
Yeah, and we have changed that a little bit for this
Okay.
year's program. And part of the thing with the replacements, I mean, they were replaced because they were non-compliant.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
You know, due to a cross slope or other type of
Okay.
slope or area, so.
Okay. And then the other thing was the chip and seal bids, or somebody said chip and seal today and it got me all fired up, so I thought I'd ask.
Chip and seal. It's
So-
You mean for Main Street?
They were actually talking about putting it on their driveway, and I was like, what a great idea, you know?
Man, Rich, you just like to poke the bear, don't you?
I'm just wondering, are we, you know, it's about that time of year to start getting that stuff out.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, and so staff is working on moving towards finalizing those plans.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. That was all.
And
I
it's,
had.
it's chip seal, right? Not chip and seal.
It's granite seal here.
It's granite seal, yeah. Granite seal.
But yes, it's chip and seal.
Chip and seal.
Yes.
Okay.
And then
There's
are we
little
gonna-
chips and seal.
And seal,
As a
yeah.
person who's applied it,
Right.
you can lose hair real quick.
And I would say, you know, currently we are planning to fog seal everything that we
Oh,
chip
yeah.
seal.
Nice.
That
I
sounds
think that
fun.
will be, based on what I saw with the, Kill Creek, it made a huge
Yeah,
difference.
it's been very well received
Yep.
and performed well.
Yeah,
There'll still be somebody complaining.
Wow.
I'm sure.
That'll be okay.
Everybody complains. of something. Okay, you done?
Yeah, that's it. Sorry,
right.
I forgot I had
I
those.
want to talk to my chiropractor friend here.
Oh!
So, what, do you have
After
anything?
that, no, I have nothing.
All right, I want to make sure that everyone knows I got it right this time. And I understand, yes.
Congratulations on the promotion.
Yeah. Councilwoman Gregorsik.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a couple of items. 2 of the 3 are for the chief. Chief, could you explain the crossing guards contract and kind of who's handling that if a cross guard's not there and kids are crossing the streets at Moonlight and Grand by themselves? Is that us or is that the school?
No, we do contract that. I can't remember the name of the company that we're contracting with, but if we get notified that there's nobody there, then we'll go cover the intersection. We haven't had any problems with this company. We've had them for the last couple of years. The company before that, we had multiple difficulties where we'd have to go cover, but to my knowledge, we haven't had to do that with this company.
So when you say contacted, would the school, whether it be the principal or maybe a teacher that's outdoors, see that? Or would
Yes,
it be
most of the
just
time, it's actually a parent.
or a
that calls
citizen?
and
Okay.
says, hey, the crossing guard's not here.
Okay. The next item I had for you, Chief, was Larry and I met with Rocky Gupta. He's the new owner of the fill-in station out on 191st in Gardner Road. We talked about car washes, and I didn't know what your interest in that was. Excuse me? Yeah. I didn't know what your interest in that was. I know Matt's done some work on kind of the dollars and cents of it. I'm not looking to suggest that we have a single car wash choice. I see it more of a add his location as an additional choice or an additional place to get a city vehicle, mainly the police cars, washed. And I didn't know what your interest in that was and whether we should pursue it or let sleeping dogs lie.
Yeah, we actually don't use any commercial car washes right now. We wash them in the bay. So that would be a change. We tried tokens probably a year ago, but we went through them so fast, it just wasn't cost effective to do that. Most of the patrol vehicles are washed every day, the 4 that we have on the road. A lot of the command staff and other people, we just, pay ourselves to have them washed because we don't, it just doesn't make sense for us to be out there and washing them. So But a place to go would be great. It's just a matter of cost.
Okay. So for the council, and Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but Rocky offered a $5 car wash for city vehicles. And I obviously thought of our police department along with our parks department, et cetera. I didn't know what your interest was collectively. I think the email has been shared with all of council with respects to cost.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it.
It was today.
Oh, okay. So just take a look at that. We can table it, take a look at that, and I'd love to hear your opinion. But I just saw it as another choice for our city employees to go to if it's cost feasible versus cost prohibitive. So just something to consider. Yes, sir.
Will the new facility have that ability to wash vehicles?
Only in the bay and the Sallyport. We made sure there was water and stuff. And we do
Okay.
have a power washer
Right.
that some of them use. But yeah, they just hook up the hose and do it in the bay.
So who does that work?
Whoever has the car. We
Right.
actually divide the car maintenance. The day shift does the outside. The PM shift does the inside. Make sure they're clean, vacuums out, stuff.
And knowing that, my idea for seeing if this option was viable is that if it's 0 degrees out there and our black cars look salty and so forth, that they wouldn't have to get out, get their dress blacks all dirty and so forth, and they could just drive through and get a undercarriage, get a $5 wash basically, and be able to get back on patrol. I don't see this as a daily, but I see it more of as a convenience when the weather, perhaps, as an example, drives them to, no pun intended, but drives them to not want to be outside and quickly get back on the road.
In the bay, they're already protected, right, Chief? They can close the
Oh,
door
are you?
in there,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I mean, it's an option to look at.
Yeah, I mean,
Sounds like we also might have a garage that we could move and put somewhere and drive through and wash too.
So anyway, the email's out there. Just take a look at it at your convenience. The last thing I had was, do we have a city administrator update, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, the submission period ended on February 1st, was this past Friday, and we received 44 resumes, which is very healthy, very good for a position such as this. They're going to be compiling those and they're scoring them in the next week or so. They're going to get those back to us, the city administrator, myself, and the HR director, and then we're going to sit down and just kind of look through those real quick, and then we're going to be scheduling interviews, Skype interviews with I think like the top 15, I think, is what we're going to bet down to, and then we're going to talk to those folks, and that should be happening. What were we talking about? The second half of the month?
But yeah, I think that it'd be, anyway, like, not next week, but probably the week
Yeah.
after, per League of Kansas Municipalities.
Correct.
It would be the selection committee that would be doing that.
Yes, the selection committee would be doing that.
So that's a guess. I don't think it could go any sooner than that week.
Correct.
And so have we reached out to those volunteers that have been appointed by
we've
3 of
already-
the 5 of us?
No, because League has not provided
Okay.
any dates yet.
Yeah.
We have to get
The second that
back
happens,
first.
yeah, the
Yes.
second that happens, we'll put out the notification.
So we're looking at probably 15 plus or minus days.
Probably,
Okay.
second half of the month. We just don't know when yet. But 44 resumes, that's given us a really robust pool.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy. I'm very happy with that
I agree.
response. We've got a wide range of diverse candidates from what I understand. Some are local, some are not local. And from a wide range of experience levels too. So I think it's good. It's good. I like that.
And thank you, Mayor. That's all I had.
Yep. Last but not least, Mr. Baldwin.
In regards to new business item number 1, but just in passing,
Mhm.
anytime there's something where we're changing it because it's a clerical thing, basically, the state changed and it's 6% now, and is it possible that we can always just point to the KSA regs instead of having to always change our number and then update and update and update in the future? Can we just point to the state and be done with it?
So with cereal malt beverage, they changed the definition of that, but cereal malt beverage has always been regulated at the city level. The state ABC doesn't regulate that like they do drinking establishments. So we have an entire section of the code that deals with CMB that really isn't addressed that's specifically in state statute.
Okay.
I mean, so,
Yeah.
so we have to, we couldn't just say, yeah, we're
Follow the
adopting
state.
this because it applies and affects various sections of the entirety of our code.
This comes back, this is a vestige from when you had dry cities, dry counties within the state of Kansas, and they wanted to be able to manage that stuff locally. It's been that way for 150 years probably in this state, and the problem is that our alcohol laws are a mess. They're antiquated, they're backward, they're very convoluted, Byzantine, and all sorts of different. Most folks don't even know how they work. I mean, you literally have ABC. It's like, you know, you got a bunch of people today just basically, you know, pouring through, you know, laws that in some cases were passed 70 years ago. It's kind of a mess. But that, I think that's one of the things that I know this particular legislature wants to try to work on, is trying to streamline and make more consistent those rules. I hope that happens, because
Maybe we should have added it to the legislative agenda.
Could you go?
Well, I think that I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to it. I think it helps a lot of the folks in this town to have certainty on how the alcohol laws work in this state.
They work on, okay.
That's all I had.
Thank goodness.
Thank you, Mark. All right, well then, I will not be adding on to anything because most of that stuff's been said. Thank you very much to staff for the work and the presentations that were done tonight. Excellent overview, and with that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstentions? We are adjourned. That's not mine.
That's not mine
I know we won an hour.
Yeah, for a short meeting.
Well, you know why? Because we have 2 items on the agenda that were.
Yeah,
I think it was the learning about Kansas liquor law. I think the Croatian.